sheet going around. One, if you'd like to sign if you are present. Two, if you'd like to give public comment. We're very happy to have Secretary Collin here from Delaware Natural Resources. We also have David Small, who's like standing there, and Marjorie Croft we have here. There's handouts that go with the presentation that will be handed out at the end. And I would like to say the best thing would be to, Collin speaks pretty fast, so hold your questions and we'll be done in like 5 minutes. No, just. Right. Okay, there you go.
Okay, well, thank you.
Introducing.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all coming today. I appreciate it. I'm going to run through about 30 slides, but I do talk at a ridiculously rapid speed, so we'll go through it really quickly at a time for questions. I really want to start with kind of the premise of our presentation today, that a strong economy really depends upon a healthy environment, and that if we're actually smart about it, smart environmental policy can actually help strengthen the economy and actually drive some economic growth. And so I'll talk about some ways that we're doing that in the course of the next day. But I think, hopefully folks have seen in the last couple of years we're being much more efficient, helping move a lot of projects, but also doing it in a way that's actually improving air quality, improving water quality, and making our economy more competitive. So there's kind of 4 areas that I'd like to focus on for legislative priorities for this year. First one is looking at flooding. Obviously we're seeing more extreme storms, more precipitation during these storms, and so how do we prepare our state to face those? The second is kind of the bread and butter of the regulatory side of the agency. How do we ensure clean air, clean water, and safer soils? The new joke in the department is that if the soil isn't clean enough for my 1-year-old to eat, then we probably should work on cleaning it up a little further. A little bit of a laugh line. Tough room, it's like in the sun. Okay, the third bullet is kind of growing the tourism industry, and I'll talk more about it, but also using that as a mechanism to actually improve our enhancement and our conservation of our outdoor heritage, and then finally ensuring that we're efficient and predictable in our permitting. So those are the areas I like to focus on. So first I'll start with drainage. I like using pictures of Representative Kenton's district every chance I can to talk about this. So Hurricane Sandy. Obviously we're still doing a lot of repair work from the storm. We didn't face the impacts of some of the states to the north of us, but we did have a lot of damage. These are just different pictures from across the state. So the tops are actually in between Representative Mulroney's and Representative Longer's districts and the dikes. The boardwalk at the pier at Cape. Looking down at Cape Shores, a lot of sand erosion there. Then obviously the Indian River Bridge, the old bridge that walked onto the dunes at Indian River, the repair work there. So we saw a lot of impacts, but it wasn't just in the coastal communities like we often think about, but into the Bay beaches, into the inland bays, into South Wilmington, Newcastle, and Delaware City. One of the things that was challenging with this storm is that as the storm track actually moved further north, from the projection. We actually were on the backside of the storm, and so what ended up happening is that the inland bays, so as the storm's moving kind of counterclockwise, the inland bays actually got pushed into the bay, inland bays actually got pushed into the bay communities, which is why we saw all the flooding in Fenwick, in Bethany, and South Bethany, in places like Old Orchard, but it wasn't actually coming from the ocean side, it was coming from the other side. The dunes worked. The dunes and the ocean beaches worked. So we are focusing on a few restoration areas right now, reestablishing the dunes that did serve their function. We do need some repair work. We'll be doing that with the Army Corps. The Indian River Inlet Bridge, we work with Representative Gray and others on making sure we have a more protective system. The system needs to be about 10 times larger than it is right now as a way to protect it, to make sure we don't have to shut down the bridge every time there's a storm. The dikes and dams, I'll talk about that in more detail in just a second. Looking at our parks and wildlife areas, we did have a lot of inundation in our wildlife areas along the bay. We also had some damage in places like Cape Henlopen State Park, as well as Seashore State Park, so trying to repair those. And then also just looking at drainage and wetland projects. A lot of them worked, and some of them didn't, some were overcome. So how do we think about improving those projects? So there's kind of 4 areas that I'd like to kind of focus on when we talk about kind of preparing for these types of storms and drainage. And so kind of the harder infrastructure on the top, so dikes and dams and drainage projects. And then some of the softer infrastructure on the bottom, our wetlands and our tax ditches. When we talk about coastal defenses, a lot of the investments that are needed just have been neglected for a long time. So actually this is a picture of Newcastle. So you got Delaware City right here, City of Newcastle, Representative Mulroney's district. There are actually 5 dikes along there. There are actually some of which go back to before the founding of the country, back to the Dutch. And they've been kind of haphazardly improved over the years, but there hasn't been any kind of real strategic investment in them. And because of that, this is the Red Line dike. The refinery is kind of down here. Oxychem and Metachem are just off the picture to the right, to the west. you see this kind of massive erosion. And the challenge is that if the bay actually breaches these dikes, you're basically washing contaminated sites onto residential communities. And so we have a bunch of work going on right now. We're very grateful to Representative Mulroney for helping with bond bill appropriations the last few years. But the challenge is these are just investments. They're not sexy. People don't really talk about them until they fail. There's a real huge question about ownership and who's responsible for maintenance. Our question is we'd rather fight about that after they're fixed rather than waiting in a long protracted legal fight. So there's 5 of them working on up and down the coast. Also looking at our dams. Obviously we've had a bunch of issues down in Representative Duke's district, down in Seaford and Laurel. We're actually working on a bunch of projects right now, but places like Ferns and Records down in the Nanaco and Broad Creek. Looking at other ones up and down the state, but we're actually making a bunch of investments over the next year with again, resources from the bond bill. There's legislation coming forward about some of the responsibilities related to the dikes. A few years ago, this body passed dam safety regulations. We don't really have a similar approach for the dike shed, and so we might want to model that in some way. But we're doing work at Silver Lake and Milford. We're doing work at Blair's Pond. We're actually doing the spillway already at Perms. And so there's a lot of these projects going on up and down the entire state. Looking at drainage projects, we've implemented about 64 projects in the past year. This is of the $60 million backlog of 21st century projects that exist. There's only about $8 million in that account, and there hasn't been any dollars appropriated to it in several years. There was some additional flexibility provided by the General Assembly last year, where we could actually move projects to that are higher priorities, higher in the list, projects that had most of the money. We were able to kind of reallocate some funds to get some projects on the ground. We were able to move about $2 million of projects this year because of that flexibility. But as I mentioned, there's $80.6 million of projects. There's a 10% match, and then about $8 million in the account, which gets you to about $60 million of unmet needs. 77% of the new projects added over the last year were in Sussex County. And this is one of the challenges because they don't really have a drainage code right now. And so we end up using capital money after the fact. And we'll be bringing back some recommendations. There was a bill passed 2 years ago, which is called Senate Bill 64, which actually pulled together a working group to look at kind of drainage standards and floodplain standards across the state and come up with some common sense recommendations for the municipalities. Rather than having it be a state law, we're going to recommend that we work with each of the local governments to implement it in the way that they most see fit. But we also hope to try to incentivize that by encouraging places that have better policies to have a little bit more priority when some of these projects are available. It's much cheaper to have better policies on the front end than to try to have an engineered solution on the back end. A lot of projects in 2013, Silver Lake and Rehoboth has been a flooding issue for a long time. Plantation Crossing, there's a bunch of projects in Delaware City, Hudson Road, Lewis. And so there's a lot of these projects that are really critical, and these places are getting flooded out every time there's a heavy rain. Another area that's really part of our flood protection strategies is our wetland conservation. Delaware has an extremely effective tidal wetland program. We don't have the same protections for freshwater wetlands. And there's ways to have more incentives, there's ways to have more incentive-based and have a combination of kind of regulatory approaches as well as incentives to try to protect these resources that the average acre of freshwater wetlands can hold between 300,000 and 1 million gallons of water. So when you fill it in, when somebody packs into it, those gallons of water go somewhere else. And so often they go on to the neighbor who then calls you asking for a 21st century project. And so the question is, how do we incentivize these to be kind of kept to their natural function so we can use that storage capacity to buffer against these storms. And then also just kind of looking more broadly at some of our vulnerabilities as we're seeing more and more intense storms and facing the long-term sea level projections. Looking at things like our wastewater infrastructure. We had some challenges at the Lewis plant during the storm. We actually had to evacuate the plant, and we had to rescue the workers there by boat to get them out of the site. They stayed as long as they possibly could. But finally we kind of said, look, it's more important to save your life than keep the plant operating. So there's projects like that, looking at other types of projects, whether they're impoundment projects and those sorts of natural projects or other types of improvements in some of the industrial facilities. Some of the challenges of the port related to drainage. It's very, very close to sea level already. And so as we're thinking about that facility's future, how do we make sure there are investments made there in addition to the other needs? And so there's a series of recommendations that will be coming over the summer, most of which deal with more information. And then it's also thinking about short-term investments that also improve drainage that also serve a double benefit of protecting us from these longer-term projections. So that's kind of the first category of drainage and flooding. The next one is looking at clean air. And so these are just 4 facilities that we've made some progress. I could have had a dozen more on here. But over the last 4 years, under the leadership of the governor, we've made significant improvements at plants up and down the state. We've actually reduced our emissions from these facilities, and most of the criteria was by 90 to 99% for mercury, for things like nitrogen oxides, nitrogen, and sulfur dioxide. So the Indian River plant down in Millsboro, and John, Representative Atkins district, worked with John on cleaning up that plant, and so it actually has $350 million of controls on it right now, one from being one of the dirtiest plants in the country to one of the 10 cleanest. The Edgemore plant up in Claremont, north of Claremont, we actually added, or outside of Claremont, we helped the company switch it from coal to natural gas, making it much cleaner under Collin's leadership. The Energy Dover facility right over here that provides steam for the Kraft facility and some other manufacturers, we actually helped switch that from coal to natural gas, putting in a cogen unit that's much more efficient, making the prices come down, making Kraft a little more competitive, and they're even thinking about maybe adding some more jobs. And then Claremont, we were with Representative Heffernan and Representative Williams and a few others, Representative Short on Monday, dedicated a $17 million facility that's going to capture 99% of the particulate emission that has for years affected the Claremont community, where folks would wake up and have a little metal dust on their cars. This will capture 99.9% of that. And at the same time, will actually increase their capacity to increase their throughput. So they'll be able to actually manufacture more. Their efficiency's gone up, their production's gone up, they're actually hiring right now, and they're still making these kind of investments. So big benefits to air quality from that project. I could have the improvements of the refinery emissions are down about 25% compared to when Valero operated the plant. They have 30% fewer flaring incidents than they did before. Still more work to be done there. But there are a lot of these good projects going on up and down the state.
My district.
Your district, sorry. Now the challenge that we face though is that as much progress as we've made with these what they call stationary sources, these big industrial facilities, as much as 95% of the air pollution that you breathe on a given day comes from out of state. So these are coal plants and other facilities to the west of us. And as this map shows, some of them are as far away as Illinois, Missouri, Indiana. And so the challenge that we have is that for us to meet our quality standards, there really isn't much more that we can do in state because we've switched most things from coal to gas. We've switched a lot of the oil units to gas. We have a lot of renewables, a lot of efficiency, a lot of these bag houses and other types of units. And so there are still opportunities in transportation, but that's more of a federal policy. And then we have to figure out how to work with our neighboring states to try and get some relief. We're not asking anyone to do anything we haven't done already here, but that is the challenge. When we have these high ozone days, and 95% of the pollution we're breathing is coming from neighbors to the west of us. Jumping to water for a second, this is a map that shows the level of impairment of Delaware waterways. And what you'll see in the map is that every waterway in Delaware is impaired to some degree. Some are in kind of the 25 to 50% range, 50 to 75% range. The darker the color, the more impaired the waterways. And the more stream segments are impaired inside the individual pieces of sub-watersheds. The numbers are getting better. There are declining nutrient loads from all sources. Agriculture numbers are down significantly. We've actually eliminated most of the point sources. That's the direct discharges from facilities into these waterways. But these non-point sources, the stormwater runoff, the runoff from golf courses and developments and farms are still the biggest challenge that we face. And so we're also concerned about leaking like underground storage tanks and other types of older infrastructure that, as it leaks, it contaminates the groundwater. We're concerned about oil spills in the bays and in other places. And they're also concerned about the long lag time. And so even as we're making these investments today, you won't see an improvement overnight. But it's going to take a little bit of time, from the time that a cover crop is planted to the time that we actually see the improvement in overall water quality. And so there's kind of 4 areas, again, I like these kind of 4 slides. There's that we're really focused on right now. The first one is wastewater. Because of all of your assistance over the years, we've been able to implement more wastewater projects under this administration than the previous 10 years. About $150 million in projects. We replaced 20,000 septic systems in Sussex County, connecting them to the Sussex sewer system, which is much cleaner, much less polluting. And so wastewater, there are a bunch of ideas floating around that will likely come before this committee at some point this year about other ways to finance some of these projects to make them more affordable for communities. But we have a lot of projects going on, 2 big ones right now. In the city of Wilmington, there's about a $35 million project that's going to actually be able to handle their wastewater and treat the sludge the way they create the product. And they're going to use the landfill gas from Cherry Island to actually power the plant, so it'll be kind of clean energy. And then they'll have this product afterwards, as opposed to having to build these big berms of sludge that, as you can guess, don't smell very nice. So it's a great solution to a long-standing problem. Other big projects going on in Rehoboth, in Millsboro, and right here in Kent County. Conservation cost share program, these are all the cover crop programs that the district works with us on. There's a lot of good projects. There's actually about twice as much demand for these programs as there is money available. So farmers want to participate in these. It's the cheapest way to reduce the nutrient load from non-point source runoff, and it's just a lot of interest from the farm community all across the entire state. Looking at stormwater, both projects and also modernizing our approach. The traditional Delaware approach has been to have another stormwater pond that takes up a third of the site and is this big and this deep, and just asking mosquitoes to hang out by it. We believe there's a better way to do it that actually we integrated in the site design a lot more. This is just a small picture of it in a parking lot, but actually having more of it captured on site allowed more surface area to be developed. So you're actually capturing more of the water. You're slowing down the velocity. You're cleaning it a little bit in the process using plantings and the like to actually filter the runoff before it winds up in the water table. And then the last one is looking at toxics. We do have too many waterways in the state that aren't swimmable and aren't fishable, that have health, that actually have health. They actually have declarations of being unhealthy, so you're not allowed to do those activities. We came up with an innovative approach that we're first going to pilot right here at Mirror Lake, right behind us on the St. Jones. We're actually going to sequester the pollutants, in this case PCBs, and other toxic materials, and actually take it out of the water system that way as a way to improve the health. It's about half the cost of trying to dip it out, trying to dredge it out, and put it somewhere else. So we hope that if that project is successful, as we're confident it will be, we could actually remove all the fish advisories in the state within a generation. And it's actually it's an innovative program that Marge's team helped lead, that took some of the lessons from the Brownfield program and applied it to the waterways. Another area, just in this last part of this clean air, clean water, safer soils, we continue to plow through all the contaminated sites in the state. Obviously, we have a long legacy of contaminated industrial sites. We still have hundreds of contaminated sites we do need to clean up before they can be reused and redeveloped. And it's not just in Newcastle County or Wilmington, it's really across the entire state. We've completed more than 75 projects in Newcastle, another 15 or so in the other counties that now actually are ready for development, and Representative Heffernan was a big part of this in her previous career, cleaning up a lot of these sites. We are concerned about the growing groundwater contamination from some of these sites. We will have some legislation for you this year looking at additional tools to try to make sure that if there's an owner that just won't simply clean up a site that is going to contaminate folks, we have the ability to recoup those costs. And so we'll be working with you on that in the weeks ahead. We're also looking at some language to make it easier to clean up the sites that have heavy arsenic levels. And there's been challenges. The Hercules site is an example up north. There's an issue with the CVS down at 5 Points outside of Lewis, where these sites, and they're actually interested in actually participating in the Brownfields program because there's liability insurance, there's actually some dollars for the remediation. They're not eligible right now, and so we'd like to make them eligible for that program so we get a cleaner, safer site, so we're not actually putting people in harm's way by building in sites that have high arsenic levels that obviously can cause health problems if 1-year-olds like mine decide to eat dirt like she's very fond of. So then jumping to the third bullet of mine, this is kind of a little quick quiz. So this is an industry, name the industry. This is an industry that contributes $4.5 billion a year in consumer spending, $1.4 billion in wages and salaries, $300 million in state and local taxes, 30,000 direct Delaware jobs that's a hard number, and then more jobs in either banking or agriculture or chemical production. And it's our tourism industry. And we often don't talk about it that way, but the line that I've used a few times is that if there was an industry with this kind of impact that was threatening to leave, we would move heaven and earth. I mean, think about the way that our state responds if there's an opportunity to bring new bank jobs in, or if a bank is threatening to leave, or think about how much we move heaven and earth to try to make sure that we are working with folks to breathe life into the old Allen facilities with we're in. A lot of work going into these, but we don't think about our natural resources and our tourism that are the basis of our tourism industry the same way. And so I want to propose a quick framework that I first rolled out with the Bonneville Committee under Representative Johnson the other day. The 4 B's of our tourism economy. You can't let's read the bottom two, but the 4 B's being beaches, so our great ocean beaches, our boats, our waterways that people love experiencing up and down the coast for either fishing or just recreational boating or commercial watermen, our bikes, so our trails, our parks, getting folks on earth, and then our birds, whether it's for hunting or for bird watching. The wildlife we have here is absolutely remarkable. And when you total up the economic impact in these sectors, you're talking in the billions, in the multiple billions of dollars. The assets of the agency are the holdings of the agency are vast. 26,000 acres of parkland, 26,000 acres of parkland, 62,000 acres of wildlife areas, 4.5 million visitors just to our state parks in there that are actually being counted as they come through. A lot more users in that, but that's the actual hard attendance for paying individuals. Wildlife participants, over 350,000 folks are either hunting or fishing in our state areas every year. We have 275 miles of roads and trails, 20 to 30 miles of shoreline that we are responsible for. So I just see a massive amount of public infrastructure that really does support this tourism economy. So jumping to the first B, the beaches. So we have our 5-star beaches that we're very proud of in both Rehoboth and Dewey. And actually Fenwick and Lewis actually met the same standard as well in Bethany. We're only allowed 2 per state. These projects do meet the federal cost-benefit test. That's why there's beach nourishment projects that go on in these communities where the federal government will actually pay 65%, we pay 35%. We did $39 million worth of work this past year. It's one of the reasons that Bethany doesn't look like some of the communities in New Jersey. I mean, places that had these types of projects done, like in Ocean City, in Cape May, for example, didn't see the same kind of damage as other communities further up the peninsula that didn't have these kind of investments made. The match comes, so the 35% match from the state comes from 1% of the state accommodations tax. That accommodations tax is only on hotels at this point. And so we get about $2 million a year. We typically save it up for a few years and then have it available for the match when every 3 or 4 years we end up doing these projects. And then as the last bullet says, every 3 to 5 years we need about $7 to $10 million. So that's just the ocean beaches. If you move to the bay beaches, so kind of starting at Pickering or even a little further north into Woodlawn or Bayview, then going all the way down to Broadkill. We provided about 75,000 cubic yards of sand in the past year. The projections, about $30 million worth of projects are needed for the next 10 years. And that's a little misleading. That doesn't necessarily buy you 10 years. It buys you a 10-year storm event. And so in the last 2 years, we've had 2 10-year storm events that haven't hit this area particularly hard, with the exception of kind of Prime Hook, which already had a lot of erosion issues. But it's not a cheap proposition, and we've done a very significant cost-benefit analysis looking at where do the benefits accrue. So if we are going to spend public dollars, does the most of the benefit go to public recreation? Does it go to natural resources? Does it just go to the private landowners? And what we find is that a lot of the benefits in these smaller communities do go to the private landowners. And so that's not to say that there isn't a public role, there is, but it's probably need to be cost share. There probably needs to be some private dollars from local communities, local governments, and the like to share these costs, because we just don't have a revenue stream that could actually support that level of project right now. And then also, how do we improve those ratios by having more public access and more additional users of some of these areas that might encourage additional public dollars to be used. The second B are boats, so our waterway maintenance. We've had a big challenge the last few years, and Representative Atkins and I have been working on this together, because the Army Corps doesn't receive the funding that it used to receive for a lot of the secondary waterways. This is particularly a problem in the inland bays, places like Pepper Creek, places like Massey's, Indian River, Herring Creek. The Murder Kill, obviously a little further north, we're going to be doing this fall, up by Bowers. And then Little River is actually becoming a challenge for some of the fire boats that Lipstick and Little Creek use. And so the Army Corps used to provide these functions. They used to do it over a several-year period. They're just not going to do it anymore. With the federal sequester, things are actually getting worse. We're having a hard enough time moving projects like the Nanaco or the main channel, which obviously we fought against for a while, but now it's being done in an environmentally sensitive way. The work around the port. And so those are kind of the major areas where they're investing their navigation dollars in Delaware. And so the more recreational ways really need a different way to be funded. We did receive some money in the bond bill last year to do Murder Kill, we're doing Pepper Creek. That picture on the bottom is actually Pepper Creek, which is happening as we speak. Hopefully that'll be done in the next couple of months. But we need a different model to fund these things, because there's nothing worse than spending money on a boat trying to get outside and doing stuff in shoal. And there's different models for how other states fund things, and so we'll likely have some recommendations for this committee later this year. Then moving to our bikes, looking at our trails and our parks. We have a world-class park system, and we're very blessed to have state parks in every corner of the state. There's a bunch of successes over the past year. The picture on the bottom is the C&D Canal that's going to connect Delaware City all the way to Chesapeake City. We're actually going to get that red part, you can kind of see the red line in the middle. That's going to be completed in the next month or so. So we're kind of connecting the St. George's area and just west of that all the way to Moss Pond. So we're connecting that stretch. The next stretch is connected to Delaware City, then eventually to connect all the way over to Chesapeake City. But good projects up and down the entire state. We're doing a lot of work in Representative Gray's district. There's a lot of projects going on in Newark. And that picture right there is actually the Pomeroy Trail that connects about 75 miles of other trails. It was kind of one piece that was missing to connect the rail station in Newark in the James Hall branch that exists kind of South Newark, to the White Clay Creek State Park going through downtown, connecting to Main Street. And so a lot of the students now can actually get where they need to go on this trail rather than having to jam up the traffic on Main Street. So just good projects up and down the street, leveraging a lot of federal dollars, a lot of private dollars. Our fourth B, the birds. When we think about hunting and bird watching, make hundreds of millions of dollars of economic impact every year. Paul Ryan actually mentioned at one point that he likes duck hunting in Smyrna. Our big focus right now is how do we make this area seen as more of a destination, and not in a impactful way, but really looking at low impact activities like hunting, like fishing, like bird watching, like canoeing, like kayaking. How do we provide trails, and how do we provide overlooks and platforms and things like that? Representative Kent and I spent some time on the Mississippian. That was maybe 6 months ago now, and there's just a lot of opportunities. I mean, these are gorgeous places that very few people, particularly folks that just go right to the beaches, ever experience. We have 5 or 6 million people that fly down Route 1 and have no idea what they're passing. And we think this could be a huge economic engine for Kent County, for bed and breakfast industry, for new restaurants, for new bait and tackle shops, for other kind of sports gear. And so we view it as a way to enhance these resources, and we're going to be acquiring additional parcels, we're going to be improving the dikes and some of the levees and some of the impoundments, improving the habitats and moving invasive species, and then also giving those additional amenities. So if someone wants to go birding and take a look at the red notch, or someone wants to go hunting in hunting season for a teal, they have the amenities to do that. And then all of this, our tourism effort is also kind of focused simultaneously on our No Child Left Inside effort. This is our Children in Nature initiative. We have some scary statistics in this state. 38% of all Delaware kids are statistically obese. The numbers projected to go up to 66%, 68% by 2030, unless we kind of change the way we're doing things. Kids that are spending more time outside do better in school, are healthier, they're happier, they have a greater appreciation for nature. And one of the scariest statistics is that the average Delaware kid is spending about 50 hours a week in front of some kind of screen outside of the classroom. And so this is in addition to the 36 hours or 30 hours you're spending in school, another basically full-time job playing PlayStation, PS3 or Wii or Xbox, or playing on a computer or playing on a smartphone. We need to figure out a way to get kids outside. And so we're trying to do it. That's actually Sam Burke's grandson, the upper right-hand corner. We're trying to figure out whether it's hunting, fishing, playing in nature, playing on the trails, just really trying to get kids outside, playing sports. But we have a great set of partnerships, and we'd like to kind of keep you abreast of this effort, because even if folks aren't concerned about the environmental piece of this, the healthcare cost implications of this are terrifying, absolutely terrifying. We start looking at the juvenile diabetes numbers and the like. The very fourth bullet, just on permitting. I apologize for too many words being on the slide. We're meeting and exceeding almost all the governor's targets for permitting. We've been able to reduce most of the permitting times in our agency significantly over the past couple of years. The wetlands permits, 97% of the technical reviews are happening in 60 days. That number was half that just a few years ago. The well permits, we're turning around in 30 days. In Maryland, it's 7 months. In the small onset septic systems, we're completing the evaluation in less than 10 days. It was about 30 days a couple of years ago. We've reduced our brownfields permitting time by about 45%, our air permitting time by 50%. So I know you guys still hear complaints from time to time. But I mean, for the most part, these permits are getting out much quicker than ever before. A lot of this has to do with just a great staff. Some of it's technology. I was telling some folks a few minutes ago that there's a permit that was needed by the new owners of the Allen's facility, the RIM. We were able to turn it around in about 13 hours. And so, we're able to move these things more quickly. And we've had a great response from a lot of the regulated community. They know that if they get kind of good product in, they'll get it back quickly in a very predictable way. Now, one of the challenges that we have, though, is that we just did an assessment of looking at the way that we fund these programs. And what we found is that there's several $1 million of general funds that are actually subsidizing these programs in a way that wasn't intended when they were set up. Many of these are programs that really just benefit the individual applicants, whether that's a business or local government or an individual. And then we're subsidizing those programs with a lot of general fund revenue that can probably go to a better purpose. And so the businesses, and actually when we found that in many cases our fees are 10, 20, 30% of what they are in most other states. And the businesses are saying the fee amount isn't really the concern, the timeliness is the concern. And so we looked at some other models, and what we found is that a lot of folks in other states have moved towards models that are more user pay, or kind of a cost recovery model, where maybe you get some additional incentives and you kind of move the product along more quickly, maybe guaranteed, kind of more, have more definition around timelines, things like that. But we're analyzing that right now. We hope that this committee will consider that in the months ahead. because we do think there's a better way to do this, and they'll free up general fund dollars they can use for other purposes. But the fees in Delaware haven't increased since 1992, and so you can imagine what the cost of anything was in 1992 compared to right now. I really can't, because I was like, I don't know. Never mind. One of the ways we've been able to supplement our federal grants and the various monies that we get from different levels of government is volunteer hours. We can actually use volunteer hours as match to bring additional resources in the state. So these are just a series of projects: beach planning. You've got the governor doing a cleanup at the Mississippi Harbor with Dave holding the bag. Governor wasn't willing to hold the bag. You got the beach cleanup projects. We have street cleanup, trail cleanup projects, all kinds of invasive species removal and volunteer hours out at Fort Delaware. About 127,000 hours of service was provided last year across 7,000 volunteers, and so just an incredible volunteer base. I mean, it's 1% of the state, so it's a really good amount of interest. That enabled us to bring about $1 million more of federal money into the state because of those hours that we could use as state match. And then I like to end my presentation by always kind of highlighting the incredible employees of DNREC. We got about 800 full-time employees, another 100 conservation district employees, and then about 700 part-time seasonal employees. And these guys do an incredible job. I mean, the diversity of the services they provide. When there's a meth lab found, state police calls our guys because they're the ones that have the best training to go in and be the first responders. When there's an oil spill or something turns over, when there's a fire, they're also on the scene. I mean, our emergency response group is absolutely incredible. But it's not just them. It's the folks that are running our parks and making sure we have a world-class system. It's the game wardens that are out there every day, just making sure that it's safe in our hunting areas, and folks are in the fishing and having safe hunting and fishing experiences. These are guys that don't make a whole lot, and they put their lives out there every day. And so I'm just really grateful to the great team we have, and hope you've had a chance to interact with a lot of them. We've got the governor along with Representative Carson. They went out with some of the commercial crafters to get a sense of that. It was at 5 in the morning, so I apologize for not being there. And then finally, I can't help, but I always end with a picture of my daughter. And so she just turned 1 year old, and she's kind of my constant reminder for kind of why we do what we do. And if the air is not clean enough for her to breathe, the soil is not clean enough for her to eat, we've got more work to do. But I have loved every minute I've been in this state. We have incredible natural resources. People that haven't been in Delaware, I think, have no idea what we have to offer. When Secretary Salazar was here a few months ago, we did a flyover. We flew from Delaware City all the way down to Primewood, and then we ended up at Slaughter Beach. And he turned to the governor and myself as we were flying over and said, I had no idea what Delaware had to offer. He basically knew the 95 corridor and he knew the beaches, but he had no idea about the other incredible treasures that we have. And so I'm just really grateful to this committee for being so supportive of the agency over the years. I'm so committed to improving our air and water quality, providing these great outdoor spaces, and I look forward to doing some great things with you guys again this year. So thank you very much for having me. I apologize for talking too quickly.
Are there any questions from committee members for Secretary Matt?
Speech.
Is everyone still digesting it?
Then I guess I do have a response. Where are we going to get the money that we need to be able to continue some of these projects that you're talking about?
So which kinds of projects? Just
All of them, yeah. Because every time you would say something, you said, but we don't have the money. We don't have the money.
right.
So I guess you must have a plan to go and get some of the money.
Yeah.
Where is the plan?
There's, in the governor's recommended budget for next year, about $18 million of capital.
How much?
$18 million of capital projects across the entire universe of things I talked about, a couple of things I didn't mention. I mean, there are other models that, some of these user pay models and other things that try to free up general fund things for things that have more of a general fund purpose. But I think those are conversations that we need to have. There haven't been changes to a lot of the entrance charges and things like that, and something like the parks for years. There are other ways that folks finance things in other parts of the country, and so we'd like to have a conversation about how we fund these things. Because one of the challenges is that over the last couple of years, there's been at least 4 or 5 pieces of legislation that have made it free for different folks to enter parks or wildlife areas to get free surf tags, things like that. And they're great. They're all worthy causes, and especially the first responders. They deserve everything we give them and more. They deserve more than we give them. But every one of those dollars prevents a maintenance project or some other work. And so one idea we've been playing with is trying to figure out a different funding source that would actually allow these investments to happen, but in a way that maybe more people can enjoy the parks and try and make them even more affordable. So I really feel strongly that all our natural resources should be accessible by everyone, regardless of their income level. No one should not go to a state park because they're concerned about a couple $1 fee.
Then taxes.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, I'm gonna remind you of that. Okay. Thanks.
Better taxes. User fees.
Has anybody else have a question? I have a question.
Secretary Merritt,
Yes, sir.
something I'd like to request. DODOT does this for us. Tina Shoppy does a great job. She keeps us far in advance aware of every project they're doing, whether it's my district or it's in the Dr. district. And it's really been helpful for us to keep our constituents informed. When you talk about dam repairs, it'd be nice if each one of us, and you mentioned a couple that's in Representative Peterman's in my district, we weren't aware of that.
Okay.
It'd be nice for us to be, just to keep us informed on that if we can.
Excellent.
Someone let us know in advance.
Okay, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
We can do that.
Yeah, just, I mean, it was a great presentation, and it seems like our natural resources can bring a lot to the state. So, I don't mean to challenge the concept of taxes, but the reality is we need to figure out ways to we can invest money to earn what you make money. And if we choose not to do that, that's fine, and our infrastructure will collapse, our parks will go under, and we'll be happy without taxes.
And I was going to add that two things. One is with the parks, I would be really interested in some other models that you have, because I know that there is, maintenance activities, things that we need to do at our parks that we're not able to put the investment in. And that is one of the highlights of our state parks. And then my other question was about, when you talked about that there was a higher demand for the cover crop program, which was the best way to reduce nutrient loading, how could we address that?
Yeah, there are different models. I mean, Maryland has a model where they actually get a kind of a dedicated stream from water use, and then they apply that to projects, both infrastructure and cover crop and things like that. This state's always funded it to the bond bill. We've actually looked at trading programs with, say there's we're actually beginning this conversation, say there's a wastewater treatment plant that's not meeting their standards, maybe they're over by a little bit. It might be cheaper for them to actually pay farmers to reduce their nutrient loads than it would be to spend several $1 million on a plant upgrade. And so, it's those kind of creative solutions. And I don't think all the money is from the government. I mean, I think there's other folks that can meet their obligations cheaper by working, with farmers and supporting some of these programs than some of these hard infrastructure projects that can be very expensive.
Are there any other state representatives that are here or that have any questions? And, right now I'm looking at the list of participants and people who have signed up for public comment, and there are no people signed up for public comment. Is there anybody that meant to sign up and didn't, or would like to give public comment, and we can give your name afterwards?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, please.
Okay. Do you want to
Helen
come to the
Shirley.
table?
That'd be great.
Okay. You can talk loud.
I can talk loud enough that everyone can hear me.
Okay.
I think that more attention needs to be given to the, I represent the inland bays. And of course, we're interested in the water, the runoff, the septic system, all of the things that happen. Everybody always looks at the whole picture and looks at the parks and all of the things that are happening there. However, the things where the places where we're having people violating, we have nobody who is controlling the violators of our waterways. And I think some attention needs to be given to that. That's where we need to begin, to to stop the violation of the pollution in our waters on our inland bays.
Thank you. Do you have any?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
The biggest red dot on the map that you saw was inland bays, by far. And over the last 15 years, the department has been removed almost every single point source. So all the sewer system that used to be going inland bays, with the exception of 2, have moved out. One to Millsboro, which will be done this year, and then it's not done already. Done already, Dave?
Yeah, close.
Close. And then Rehoboth in the next 2 years. But then after that, it's almost all non-point source pollution, as you mentioned, the runoff. And so the challenge is to make sure there's both accommodation incentives and also good local land use to make sure that we're reducing. But I agree with you, we need to be focused more. So one thing I am hopeful I didn't mention today, there's been a lot of conversation on aquaculture. That can be a way to reduce pollution. We're actually using natural systems and mussels and things like that, if we can get the right balance. And there's also opportunities for additional restoration and additional plantings and things like that. But I agree, we need a lot more focus on this.
And it looks like we have another.
Yeah, my name is Bernard August. My question is about the inland bays. I have actually a two-part question. Is money in the budget for to help remediate the coal ash pile down by the Millsboro plant, for one?
No, there is a remediation plan, or kind of a closure plan for the facility that actually Marge can maybe talk a little bit about. The Indian River, we just had a public hearing on this maybe a month and a half ago. You want to talk a little about the details of the plan?
Yeah, it's for capping the Burton Island, I believe is what you're talking about. And it's open until towards the end of March, the public comment period.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but NRG would have to pay for the capital.
Yeah, we
It
are
wouldn't be paid
paying for that,
by
yeah, the company is.
Oh, the
paying
company
for
is
it.
going to pay for
Yes.
it? Okay, okay.
They not only do they pay for it, but they pay our staff costs
Right.
to review documents and those type of things,
Oh,
so.
oh, good, okay. My next part is the nutrient and running into the inner bays. Years and years ago, I was involved in the negotiating process with the Sierra Club, just as an independent, about the chicken farming, the chicken processing plants. And I keep up kind of on the environmental problems with the phosphorus and things like that, getting into the water table, actually. California right now is having a terrible problem with the groundwater because of over-nutrient usage. And so when you say that you're going to let the farmers have a say on what to do, don't you think it would be better to possibly regulate how much nutrients they put out and all this stuff? To try to regulate the nutrients a little better, that, and that has been being done by.
Yeah, so Delaware was one of the first states to actually have a nutrient management commission where the farmers are actually required to have a nutrient management plan for their facility, and that's it's a pretty aggressive process where they have to actually say how much they're going to use, they have to mitigate the impacts of it. They have to have things like, have paved areas underneath manure and others, so that you don't have that kind of.
Right, I understand all of that, but we're still having the problem, so
I
I
agree. But if you look at reductions in the agriculture industry over the past 15, 20 years, they're pretty dramatic. And one of the challenges is that we're not seeing similar reductions in some of the other sectors of the economy. And so, there's still more you can do, and if we had more cover crops and more practices, more planted buffers and things like that, there still are additional reductions there. But for the most, the farmers have invested much more towards our water quality problems than most developments, and other sources.
Right.
So, I think our goal is to make sure that everyone's doing their part, because we need all that and more. But a lot of the farmers actually are doing a pretty good job. And I think if we give them additional resources, they'll do even more. But I take your point completely, because the non-point source reduction, non-point source pollution is the reason I'm concerned about potential dead zones in the bay. Make some changes.
So would you consider possibly a regulation, like possibly on lawn fertilizers and all these types of things like this for the suburban farmer? People apply that stuff like crazy all over the place and overdo their lawns, but these are ideas that you could come up with.
Yeah, and actually Maryland and Virginia and others have adopted those. We've actually benefited from that because we're in the same market, and some folks get shipped. We actually have the low phosphorus fertilizers right now. And we actually did promulgate new regulations last year with NK and the Department of Agriculture around the contained animal feeding operations at chicken farms. But yeah, I'll be happy to talk to you about that.
All right, thank you very much.
And then we can, are there any other people that had public comment or any other questions now from legislators? And if not, then I wanted to thank you so much Secretary Maurer for coming and sharing the legislative priorities with us. And I know that we're going to speak about these. There's hard copies available